Welcome, everyone, to the High Performance Legal Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Arkfeld, president and founder of Prevail Legal Marketing. And today, Shaina Weisinger is joining us. She's the founder and CEO of Repurpose House. Hi, Shaina.
Hey there, how's it going?
Repurpose House repurposes long form content into optimized videos and images for high engagement social media strategies. Shaina, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
All right, so let's kick it off with some of the basics. Could you tell us a little bit just about how Repurpose House works and what the product does?
Yeah, so we're technically considered a productized service, which means like we're an actual service-based company, but it's supposed to feel like a product or like SaaS, right? So what we do is we'll take any type of long-form content, video, audio, text even from your blog, and we'll turn them into really cool optimized videos for any social media channel. So all the different shapes and sizes, like tall for stories, TikTok, Reels, all that stuff, square for your feeds, landscape for YouTube. We put all the captions on it. We basically do all the dirty work that everybody knows they need to do, but nobody wants to actually do. And then we make it look cool and clean for your brand with branding and stuff like that. So we take it as far as like, you just let us know what you want and we spit it back out to you, all the way to we've got teams of curators to go through all of your content, find the best little nuggets that were awesome, and all the way to posting them onto your social channels. So it's really as much or as little as you want help with. We're here to assist on really cool, engaging social media strategies.
Awesome, cool. There's a couple of things I want to dig into a little bit more, but first, how did you come up with the idea for the business? It's very unique.
Oh my gosh. So I have a background in video production. I did a lot of like marketing videos for a lot of different cool companies. And at one point I realized that long form content was really, really great, especially like value based content. And that came in the easiest form as podcasts, video, quote unquote, video podcasts, if you will. So I had a lot of clients who would come into studio, they'd bring like 3 or 4 different guests, a couple of different shirts, and we'd film these long form video podcast episodes. And then a part of that product was these tiny snippets of repurposed assets and all the same thing, all the different sizes, whatever. And as I was pitching this whole let's do video podcasts to audio podcasters, I kept getting the same feedback. And it was like, we don't care about the video part. Like, all that's great and cool, but no. But if you only did this one piece where you just repurposed our stuff and sent it back and made it look cool, we'd pay you whatever you want for it. And I was like, this doesn't exist already. And it didn't exist as a service in itself. Like, you could pay an agency to kind of do the full gauntlet and manage your show and whatever for a couple $1,000s a month at least, or there were just tools for you to do it yourself. And I had a friend my friend Russ owns Design Pickle, you know Russ. And I had done a bunch of work with them. I'd gone to the Philippines with them. I had done a bunch of like behind the scenes understanding how that worked. And they're a productized service also. And I was like, holy cow, like this could be something that could be really beneficial, super cost efficient, and scale pretty rapidly if I built it from the ground up that way. So that kind of got the gears turning. It started as just podcasts only. And we realized very quickly that that was not the audience. It was actually marketers who were utilizing podcasts as one part of their marketing strategy. So then we evolved into just all forms of content.
Got it. So you started off doing podcast, doing the whole video thing. And so why didn't people want the initial part of the service that you were sort of pitching? Like, what was
You
it
know,
about?
I think that they just had gotten into a groove with their long form content, which is great. I mean, a lot of them were really successful podcasters. Like, you've heard of a bunch of them that we were talking to, and they had engagement on their show. They were like, I don't need to add another element to this thing. It's working. But the pain point was really being as strategic with that long form content as they could be and getting it all over the place and getting as much juice out of it. And that's just a pain point that so many content creators have. It's like, cool, I filmed this piece of content, but now the painstaking journey of like cutting it up into all the different pieces and making sure it gets distributed everywhere in the right way is just so time consuming, and not even in a way that's really fun. So
Yeah.
I think for them, seeing that that was a part of the offering was really attractive, because they're like, I don't like, we've got step one locked and loaded, which is the case for a lot of content creators, but the rest of it just seemed like daunting.
Yeah, it's super tedious and time consuming. And we're a customer, so we know that we know the value of it. We use it for this podcast, which is amazing. You know, at the end of the
Yeah.
podcast, we submit it to Repurpose House and they kick back the social assets. So any social assets that you see for the podcast come from Repurpose House. So we can vouch for it.
If you're
Um,
watching this clip on Facebook,
yeah,
this came from Repurpose House.
that's right. Yeah, created by Repurpose House.
Yeah.
The idea of a productized, what do you call it? Productized service?
Productized service. Yeah.
Productized service is really interesting. And especially I wonder, for attorneys. So can you just talk a little bit more about that business model and we talk a lot about specialization on here with some of the different guests, and I'd like to hear about the benefits of the model for you as a business owner, but then also for the consumer, because I think it benefits both.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's really the most attractive part about it for me was, especially at the time in my life that I started to build it, I was the bottleneck in my video production business. Like anything that had to be approved or sent or whatever, it had to go through me, and the processes didn't allow it so that I could ever take a break ever. And I ended up with like I ended up hospitalized because of anxiety and stress. And I'm like, this is crazy. Like, you can't survive this way, and you certainly can't scale a business. And so I was like, the thing that made it attractive to me was like, okay, if you build these processes that are very clean, very concise, and you are able to assign them out and just build based on that, and you have an entire system that works and like ebbs and flows into itself, like you are able to focus on much higher level things that actually move the needle a lot further. Um, so it's really cool because we were able to build and scale so rapidly just because I understood, having had a couple of examples on how to build it productized. I love the example of like, do you remember when you were in elementary school or whatever, and you'd have to explain to somebody how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, where it's like,
Mhm,
take the knife out, and they grab it from the wrong side. You're like, oh, take the knife out from the side that's not sharp. And
mhm.
like you literally have to step by step by step. Like that's how you have to build your SOPs in a system like this. Because if you're hiring at scale, you need to make sure that every single step is accounted for, right? So that has made it easy to scale and for me to focus on bigger things. As far as the client base, what's really cool about it is it feels like software. It feels like it's just an easy thing. Like it's easy to learn. There's not a learning curve on it, really. Like a minimal, we have like a 15-minute onboarding course that just is like, here's how it works. But it should feel like a machine almost as it's being output until you get to like the higher touch type, full-fledged scale stuff. But it's really reliable. You know that there's not one person who, if they're out sick, is not going to be able to turn around your content or whatever it is that you're expecting. It's a win-win for everybody because it feels like a well-oiled machine on both sides, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah, it kinda reminds me of, I don't know if this is really the greatest comparison, but, like, going
No.
to get your oil changed, like, at Jiffy Lube or something, it's, like, so like, that's all they do, oil
Mhm.
changes. It's, like, so fast, it's affordable, and it's just, like, done, and it's everybody wins, right? Like, they're doing it quickly, they're efficient, you're efficient, everyone wins.
Yeah, and well, you just said something really, really great. It's like we do one thing. Like a lot of agencies try to do a lot of different things, which is great. But for us, it was just like we are very good at repurposing content. We don't want to create your content. We don't like it's just we do this one thing. We're very good at it. We've gotten very systematized at it. And that's the one thing you can literally just cross off your list. And for other things that you need awesome people at, we've got amazing referral partners to send you to that are also doing similar things like that. So being really, really great and niching down on something that is specific is also helpful when you're going to productize something.
Yeah, you made a comment just a second ago about seeing other people do a similar model, and, I found that for myself, when I see someone doing something that's, like, superior to what I'm doing, it's just like it gives me it's like you need to be able to like see the path. So can you explain how that's impacted your business? I mean, if you didn't know Russ from Design Pickle, do you think you would have come up with this idea on your own? Or I mean, how has that impacted your journey with Repurpose House?
The trip to the Philippines with Russ was a massive impact for me. And what was cool is I got a chance to sit down and have coffee with him a couple of times as I was like building out my processes to pick his brain on like hiring practices because you're hiring at scale for something that people need to be plugged into pretty quickly. So our entire hiring process started with how he was doing it at that time and evolved from there. Like had we started from totally scratch, it would have taken a lot longer to really fine tune how we scale our international teams. That was super helpful, making sure we understand how to like create pods and teams within our departments. Like we have 10 departments now and many of them have multiple pods within them, so it's like understanding at what point it breaks and you need to start like branching off and things like that. I think mostly though it was the confidence to be able to build something like that, to be like, okay, well they did it and it's really not that crazy. Like it's not that they had 82 employees at the time when I went, and that seemed overwhelming. But then actually hearing how he built it, I was like, that's not rocket science. It's just savvy. So being able to get some clean insight at the very top was incredibly helpful. And then you still cross bridges when you get to them and have to iron out some wrinkles yourself later. But it was definitely helpful.
Yeah, I think just in general, if there's, you know, um, you said something about if seeing someone else seeing someone else that has done it gives you the confidence to do it. So a lot of times when I'm dealing with a problem, I'm like, all right, well, this seems like insurmountable. Like I don't have any idea how to solve this. And then I'm like, yeah, but there's like 1,000 other marketers that have like solved this problem, and it's just a matter of like figuring it out. And then, do I actually want to do the work? Right. So
Right.
like, do I actually want to solve this problem this way? Do I want to do a podcast? Do I want to write a bunch of content? Do I want to whatever?
Yeah, and
So
oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, you go.
I
This
was
is
I
your
was
show.
super fortunate. It is my show. This is the podcast by Shaina. No, I was super fortunate to have a lot of really amazing people that I was able to pick the brains of, even who weren't in productized services. Like I know I've chatted with you a bunch about random business stuff. I'm like, hey, what do you think about this or that? And I have a really cool community of people that I've been able to lean on in general. Doing it on your own sucks. Like I did that with my video production company. And I think the biggest difference between that and this and how successful this has been being able to like shut my mouth and listen to a lot of other people who had done really cool things before I had. So that's insurmountable for me.
Yeah, so incredibly valuable. You talked about the Philippines, so can you talk about how the outsourcing component works and just how the kind of like the business model works? Because your service only costs hundreds of dollars per month. It's affordable, and for the amount of content you get out of that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it delivers one piece of content per day. So if you're like submitting content regularly, and you get 30 pieces of content for hundreds of dollars, and they all look amazing. They have the captions on them. They've got the progress bars on the videos. They're awesome. So how does the business model work with the Philippines?
Yeah, thank you first of all. So that was the tricky one at the beginning, and I'm really glad that I was able to lean on some other folks' expertise on that. Really, our hiring and recruiting efforts are very, very fine tuned. Like we initially like tried to hire on Upwork and Fiverr and stuff like that, and we found that was a stone cold nightmare because they're in the gig mentality and they're afraid of full time employment. And for this to work, we needed full time employees who were working Monday to Friday, 8 to 5 their time, like they get benefit. Like we wanted committed individuals who were not in that gig mentality where they're distracted by other jobs that potentially could come up. So we pulled our recruiting efforts out of that, and we ended up like we use Indeed for the Philippines hiring. We also have like a US team for the curation and like the more marketing sides of it. But the recruiting piece is really important. The way that we train them, they get trained fully. It's a 3-day training process. We actually pay them to train for those 3 days. And at the end of the training, before that, we have them sign our offer letter, and we reserve the right to either put them on the bench or hire them, depending on how quickly we need to fill that seat, or to say thanks, but no thanks. We're paying you for your time, and that's it, which is amazing because then when we hire, we know that they're trained, they're already plugged into our system, they can literally get started immediately. And we're eliminating a massive amount of churn also by training them first, seeing how they work, and deciding whether or not they're a good fit. So that has been huge because the turnover we're under 10% turnover on an international team of like 65 in 2 years. So that has been massive because when people leave, it's more expensive to onboard, right? And then we kind of started to implement the same practices when we started to build more of our US team. We just started to bring on the curation side, which is like the finding your content and posting your content piece this last year. So we've now moved that same process over. We do the training and everything up front. And that's been really, really helpful. And then the I think that the toughest part that people think of, like they think it's going to be hard, is being able to give a ton of responsibility to team leaders in the Philippines. Like we run EOS, and the majority of our leaders in the EOS meetings are Philippines leaders. Like we have an operations manager over there. Our quality control all stems from over there. So like we have to lean on their expertise, what they see happens every day, and really take their input as more valuable than mine because I'm not the one doing it every day. I'm not the one like in the trenches. So building it as you would in the US is exactly how you should do it internationally, regardless of where you want to hire for sure. And it's made a huge difference.
So in the US, are you doing that model where you said you train them, but then you reserve the right to put them on the bench?
Well, so ultimately, when we hire, US is not as benchy because the salaries are so much greater. So it's like
Right.
we know we need them if we're going to interview. But as far as the Filipino side goes, we always have a reserve bench where we're like, hey, listen, because we onboard so quickly with clients that we know we're going to need you in 2 weeks. We just don't need you right the second, but we want you trained and ready to rock and roll. But the right to reserve, no, thank you. You were, you're not quite a great fit is also extremely helpful, because then you can train 5 people, 3 fit the bill, and within the next 4 weeks, all 3 of them will be onboarded and like at some point.
What's the most difficult part of this type of a business model?
At first, it was feeling like I didn't have my finger on the pulse of everything as it grew, because it grew fast. So it was like, you feel like you're in control, and then all of a sudden, as it's rapidly scaling, you're letting other people handle different aspects of the business and feeling like you're out of the loop. That was really tough for me because I am a mild control freak. But once you start to let go of that a little bit and really trust the people and the players who you've given that responsibility to, like ultimately they have to prove themselves. But once they have and you trust them, it's so freeing to be like, hey, they have created these processes. There are processes that I don't even know how they work. And that's amazing. Like, I don't want to know, because I know they've got it locked down and it works. So that initially was the hardest part. Now, as we're growing a lot bigger, I think that one thing that Sarah and I, who is my operation, my COO, her and I were talking about how like, we want this to be such an awesome place to work. So we have like all these really cool benefits, like Flex Fridays, things like that. And with scale comes some entitlement sometimes within the company. So now we're trying to find that balance of like making sure that everybody's still at like the highest standard, but we're still an awesome place to work without being a big bummer and like write-ups and stuff like that. So now we're in this place where we're like, there's a lot of people, and making sure that everybody's still up to par is the new fun challenge. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, fun challenge.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what we'll call
consistency.
it. Yeah.
All right. Let's shift a little bit over to the more the attorney side of creating content. So if someone's listening to this and like, okay, cool, that's a interesting story, but I don't create a lot of content, and they're an attorney, right? So they might be. Most of our clients are B2C, and it's not like consumers are sitting there like, I'm going to follow all my favorite attorneys and I want to hear everything they have to say about criminal defense, because if I commit a crime, I cannot wait to see their content and see what they have to say. So that's not exactly the environment for attorneys, right?
Sure.
So I think, what advice would you have for an attorney that maybe isn't creating a lot of content right now, and they want to start having a stronger presence on social, and like what type of content, and just kind of general advice?
Yeah, so it's funny because attorneys aren't alone in that. Like any industry is like, ugh, if I haven't started creating a ton of content. I know I need to be present. It sounds like a whole lot of work. Like, what do I even do? And we've come up with a really clean way to just make it happen for the year, which is it's all you definitely want to do value-based content. So you're educating, right? I mean, that's just the base layer of it. But we've come up with a really savvy way. We call it the 7x7. So um, numbers work really well psychologically with people. People want to close the loop. So if you say, here's the top 7 things you're doing wrong when walking your dog, when they see 3 of them, they're gonna want to close the loop and read the other 4 or watch the other 4, right? So if you utilize numbers in your content, like making a long form piece of content that you can then repurpose into a bunch of little chunks and put all over the internet, is the way to do it, because now you don't have to create 82 times, you have to create 1 time, and that's turned into 82 different pieces of content. But the savvy part about it is if you say, okay, I know that I can talk about these 7 different things at length in 7 different like tips. So what that would be like, okay, if I'm a dog walker, or a dog trainer, here's the 7 things you're doing wrong when walking your dog. That's one video. But we now know that there are 7 different clips within that video that can be repurposed into their own video, into a little image quote that's like something super impactful that you said in that. And that spans across like 82 different posts, depending on what platforms you're on, right? So if you were to do 7 different videos like that, I can guarantee you can come up with 7 different topics to talk about and break that up into 7 sections, if you will. 7 of those comes up with literally enough content to fill an entire social media strategy for an entire year. So that's just where you start. You start with the base level content, give yourself a handful of, bring a couple of different shirts and film them all in one day. You know what I mean? Just have them broken out with bullet points. And then you know exactly what is going to land on social. And the best part about it is you're going to put like tip 2 of 7 ways to walk your dog properly or whatever. You have a call to action immediately in there. Like instead of them just being on Facebook watching the video or LinkedIn or wherever, they're going to be like, okay, well now I want to close the loop. And your call to action is great. go to this landing page to watch the rest of the video, where then you're, putting a retargeting pixel on them. You've got a pop-up where it's like, hey, if you need help, give us your information. You're getting them off of the platform and starting to collect data. And that's really the end game. Like, you can't deposit likes, and the only reason you should be creating content, really, unless you have advertisers and things like that you're trying to fulfill, is to get data and to get leads. And it's a really, really great way to do that with this system.
Well, I like that because people like numbers, but it also just makes it like less overwhelming to think about 7 topics.
Yeah.
Like I know 7 topics, and then it's okay. Like I know a lot about those topics, so I can definitely do 7 tips in those 7 topics. And then, if my math is correct, that's 49.
Yes. Yes,
I'll
it is.
post on Christmas or New Year's and Thanksgiving, maybe. But then that's like a year's worth of content, right? So like if you're doing one of those tips, then you have a year's worth of content knocked out super fast.
Yeah, we do. So I do like this 3 hour, intensive training on it, where we go through and it shows, like, it's like 22 different posts come out of one of those tips, like with images and video. And then that scales. And then we also do this thing where, like, we'll fly people out to Phoenix and actually like do the strategy with them, film it, and then repurpose it and all of that stuff. Because it's just like people just don't have the time, and they don't want to have to dedicate themselves to consistently keeping up with it. So if you can in your brain be like, okay, it's just these 7 pieces of content, then it makes it much more manageable.
Well, yeah, and the nice thing about like flying out to Phoenix or something is then you've actually created the space to do that. Like you've set aside 2 or 3 days, and it's like, all right, I'm gonna knock this stuff out, even if I'm not doing the filming or I'm conceptually knocking it out. Then a lot of times it's just creating the boundaries, creating the space. Like half the time I do coaching stuff because they make me go somewhere and not work and like listen, and I can't be distracted, right? So
Yeah.
just even doing that in itself adds value, even if like theoretically you don't get any value out of it. Setting the time aside is valuable in itself.
Oh, absolutely. We even call it like the 2 day in, like, when you come to Phoenix, it's like the best 2 days you'll spend on your content all year, workshop, whatever. Like, it's literally called that. Cause I'm like,
Yeah.
let's just block off the 2 days and let's just get it done. And then you don't have to think about it. And that's it. And you're just like, you're right. That's super valuable.
So someone outlines these topics, and then do you recommend that they just sit and film the entire, like, just talk about it, just film,
You
just
can. You
freestyle it
totally
and
can.
knock it out?
It's so I don't recommend scripting, because even actors sometimes have a hard time doing that, and we're not actors. So bullet points are great. If these are topics that you are super familiar with, you should be able to speak about them off the cuff. So you have your one, like, full video topic, and then you've got your subtopics within it. So those are your tips, whatever. And they're just bullet points, and just rattle them off. So I would keep each tip under 2 minutes, like 90 seconds ish. So that puts your full video at about 10-ish minutes, give or take. And you don't have to film it all together. You can film your tips individually. And if you want to DIY it, like, film it with your phone and sit in front of I'm in front of a window right now and the lighting looks pretty decent and you're good to go. Then, like, hire somebody on Fiverr or Upwork just to put it together into the one video. And then you repurpose it, the individual clips, however you need to. It's a super clean, easy process. Just
Yeah,
wear a couple different shirts. Like, don't wear the same shirt and everything. At least change that.
I'm a massive fan of the ring lights, the circular. Is that
Yes.
what they're called? Where you put
Yeah.
the phone in the middle of it, and then and like iPhones these days are so legit. You don't
Oh my
need.
God. Adam,
Yeah.
I get like, I'm excited and upset because iPhones they're so much better than the cameras I used to spend thousands of dollars on when I was doing video production, that it makes me upset and also thrilled, because now everybody can have beautiful video. But I'm like, God, I spent so much money back in the day on these crazy cameras, but it's pretty
Well,
cool.
it's all the more reason that, I mean, the video production, it's, when stuff like this, you can have your assistant come in and set up the camera and make sure that the light's good, and you have a mic or something. You just don't need all the heavy lifting. Now you still need video production for certain types of things,
Sure.
but all the like trend, like the easy stuff, you just don't need someone to come in.
No, and like, even selfie style video is outperforming professional video like crazy. I mean, that's the more organic it feels, the better it's going to perform. So there's really no excuse not to create.
So, just to expand on this topic a little bit, what are some of your tips for someone filming video? We've already talked about a couple, but like, what are the 7 tips that you have for filming video yourself?
Oh, carry the two. Okay. So first of all, people will forgive terrible video, but they won't forgive terrible audio. So one tip that I would say, there's like this, I'll send you the link to this, but it's this cute little mic. You can plug it into your phone. It's got like a 20-foot cord. So if you do want to like set up a little tripod or whatever, you're fine. But it's just a little like microphone that you pin onto your shirt and it makes everything sound really, really great. That's like 20 bucks. Just do yourself the favor and do it. Um, Generally, if you're like right in front of your face, like actually selfie styling a video, you should be fine with the audio, but making sure that the audio still sounds good is super important. Lighting is important. Don't be in a dark room because you're going to look terrible and grainy. Like, get yourself in front of a window and film it that way. If you're outside, be in the shade, not like in the bright direct sunlight. That's going to be really important. Making sure that you're not scripting, like we said, just bullet points are very, very helpful. Um, One thing that people do is they panic when they see the red light. People don't even know what that means anymore. It's just like when you know you're recording, you start to panic. The beautiful thing about using your phone is that you can delete it. So just start it, watch it, gag a little bit because you hate it so much, and then do it again after you see that you say the word 1,000 times. But like just doing it is really, really important because that's the hardest part for so many people is they're just terrified of even trying. It's like you can delete. That's fine. But those are like the big major ones. It's just like, don't be afraid. Make sure the lighting and audio is good. And there's really not that much more to it ultimately. Oh, don't film from below yourself because then you get all jowly. It's not that hot. Like go from a little bit above. That's a little bit hot. So your eyes lift up. Um, those are the big ones.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I have 7. I could come up with 7 if I needed to film a video, but on the spot, I think I've got like 4 or 5.
Well, one thing that I feel like a lot of people do like these car videos because they're like so nervous to like do it somewhere else. You know, you always see someone like filming in the car, and I'm like, you're just not comfortable filming videos. So you're doing it in your car, so you can do 100 takes, which is fine. But I've also found that if you buy a little tripod, you do the ring light. There's this little Bluetooth like remote. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
That starts and stops your video. So the nice thing about that is what you're saying. You can just delete it. So you can sit there and start it and stop it with your little Bluetooth remote, and you can have the tripod over, you know, 5 feet away, and it's really easy to do that. And I actually found a wireless microphone recently that I really like too. Doesn't
Really?
have
Will
a
you
wire
send me
on
the
it.
link? Because I
Yeah,
would love a wireless one that sounds great.
it has its own app that you have to use, so it's not native to the video. So that's the one downside.
That's
Which,
okay.
anyways, it's good.
I'm okay with that. What I will say about cars though is that even when I was doing like full-fledged video production, the audio in a car is amazing. It's basically a
Mm,
sound booth. It's a soundproof sound booth. So if you are trying to film something that's really loud, you can hop in your car and the audio at least will be really good.
there you go. Yeah, good call. All right.
Yeah.
So based on, you run a social media posting company. So like a couple tactical things that I'm always curious about, and these are like real in the weeds, just maybe I don't know if you have the answers, but like really as far as like frequency and like when you post and stuff, I know it sounds super stupid, but when do you have any insight on that? Like when you should be posting and frequency where it actually does it actually matter? I kind of
It's
feel like it doesn't matter, but I don't know. Does it matter?
Well, it does matter if you're really intensely posting. First of all, the vast majority of people are not posting enough to begin with. So it's like just get the content out there, right? Like Twitter is insatiable. There's just no way to keep up with the amount you're supposed to post. It's like the lifespan of a post is like 4 minutes on Twitter. It's asinine. I will say though, lifespans on each of the platforms really matter if you're going to think about how often you want to post. So like the longest lifespan you'll get on a post, which basically means like if you post the video or whatever and nobody comments on it or likes it or whatever, this is how long it will last on feeds that people will be able to see it. So on LinkedIn, you get your longest, and that's 24 hours. So, and what's weird is I've heard this from other people. I'll post on LinkedIn and I won't get any engagement until like 7 or 8 hours later. It's nothing. And then it comes, it like sneaks up on you a little bit. So don't be discouraged if that happens, because I've heard that from a lot of people. But you do get the longest time on that platform. The next one is, I think, Instagram. It's all on my website at some point, but ultimately, like Facebook is really, really low. LinkedIn is really high. And what I will say is that as long as you're posting once a day, you are in the clear, and you don't even have to make it that aggressive on LinkedIn as long as you're getting people to engage. Because remember, if they're engaging, commenting, liking, sharing, that brings new life to that post. It puts it to the top of their feed so that their people can actually view it and engage as well. So I would focus more on what you're creating and making sure that it's being engaged with as opposed to how often you're posting.
Do you have any? Well, actually, before that question, I've been posting on LinkedIn a lot lately, and I posted do one post about closing down my office and going work from home, and I got so much engagement on this post. For me, like a ton of engagement. I'm
Yeah.
currently up to like 150 likes or whatever, and like 40 comments, which for me is just a lot. Like
Yeah.
I'm not like a compulsive poster on LinkedIn or haven't been for a long time. And what I've noticed is that when people start engaging with some of my posts or you're connected, then they start to see your old posts. And then like I'll get engagement from posts that are weeks old. It is very bizarre the way LinkedIn, in a good way,
Yeah.
they keep your content relevant and sort of like redisplay it or something. Because I've seen people engage on posts from a long time ago. And that post that got a lot of engagement is still getting engagement. It's like 10 days old. People are still engaging with it. And that's a long time in social media world.
It
10 days.
really is. LinkedIn is very good at rewarding you for having engagement. That's why people will spend a lot of time engaging on other people's content so that those people will engage with them, or even replying to comments and being strategic about when they're replying to comments. Like going in, if you have like 7 comments on your post, replying to all 7 at the same time is not the savviest way to deal with it, because when you reply, it populates it back up to the top. So now you've got new eyeballs. So if you reply to one, let it go for 6 hours, reply to the next one. Now you're populating it again. Like there's a lot of different savvy ways. But the more you get engaged with, the more LinkedIn is going to then, like you're saying, show old content. Like they think that, oh, this person's relevant again. So let's go ahead and show them all of this older content. So it's like you see the importance of it being like engageable stuff, you know. That's funny that it
Yeah.
was the one about leaving the office. Everybody's like, oh my God, I feel
Oh my
this.
God. People are so excited to talk about work from home. It is like the trending. I mean, it's been trending for a while, but it's like still.
Yeah.
I'm actually surprised that it's still like as discussed on LinkedIn.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Funny.
Um, and so, kind of along those lines, what do you believe is what are some tips you have for creating engaging content? Because I do scroll LinkedIn, and I'm like, this is like I get some of the stuff is good, but some of the stuff I'm just like, all right, you're talking about a war. It's just like it's just boring. You know, there's just like a lot of boring content on LinkedIn. So where do you feel, what tips do you have for people to creating engaging content?
Well, there's tips about the actual content, and then there's tips about how to format your content properly so it gets the engagement. So, like the formatting piece is the easiest thing you can do, and that is making sure you have headlines. Like I don't know if anybody here knows who Gary Vaynerchuk is, or if you see the posts go through your feeds where there's like big bold text at the top where it kind of gives you a preview of what you're gonna watch, or it's a question or something that seems a little like clickbaity. That stuff works really, really well because it gives people insight on what's gonna pop up, and you're not just a talking head. That is going to be super helpful in getting people to stop scrolling. That's the first battle, right? Is like get them to stop. Captions are going to help massively. 80, if we're just talking LinkedIn, 80% of people are watching on mute. So if you have a really cool headline and you're a talking head and you don't have captions, people are not going to continue to watch. They're going to keep on scrolling. So those two things in themselves are going to be massive. The shape of the post it's crazy how much of a difference it makes. It's like a 78% increase in people actually engaging on it if the shape is square or a little bit taller as opposed to just like a landscape video. So those 3 things, like it doesn't matter what the content is. Now you're already helping yourself, right? You could be talking about absolutely nothing and you're already like a beyond the competition. But beyond that, the actual content, as long as you know your audience, you know what it is that's going to actually help them in their life, business journey, whatever it is that you speak to, like people really only care about themselves and how your content is going to benefit them in some capacity. As long as you are giving them that information in an entertaining way, whatever that is for you, you're going to do pretty well. But droning on about boring topics that nobody cares about is
Yeah.
probably not the best strategy, And ultimately, like everybody's interested in different things. So there's a market for probably all types of content or topics. But, if you want the engagement of the right people, making sure that you are benefiting them, they can walk away from that piece of content with something actionable or, invoking some sort of like, huh, okay, that's really all that matters.
Yeah, I feel like I found that trying to incorporate some sort of story around the content really helps too. Whether it's like a real client or like I do a lot of personal
Yeah.
stories to kind of like deliver a message. I use my kids all the time. They're like, I need to start paying them for being part of my social media
Right.
because they're like, yeah, they're like little employees that they didn't know it. But I find that really helps too.
I
Uh,
remember when you did like one of your first emails that was like a super personal story and it got like so much like engagement. I
yeah,
don't know if it was just the email or if you put it on social too. And you were like, oh man, people actually like you were nervous to talk just about like personal you stuff, like with business. And it was just so impactful. Like people are afraid to talk about their business and themselves, but it's like that's what humanizes you and that's what makes people want to engage because it's not just a brand. Now you're a human. And that
yeah,
that is what people can relate with.
yeah. I used to do that. Excuse me, that weekly email newsletter, and it was a
Yeah.
lot of personal stuff. And every time I did something business, it was like, yeah, I get like no responses. And then I would do something personal, and I would get tons of responses. And now I'm doing that more on LinkedIn, and I find the exact same thing. I'm like really looking at the analytics of my posts. And like the work from home thing, like that was kind of a bigger change. Like a bunch of people that work from home like got real excited about it. But almost every time, if I have a family member or a picture of a kid, eh, but it has a business story, I'm not like posting Facebook content, then
Yeah.
it gets so much more engagement every single time. So I highly recommend, using your kids as um,
So
clickbait.
what do I use then, Adam? My dogs or
Dogs work too.
they
Yeah.
do.
Use
They
your
do.
husband. I mean, just whatever it is, right?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Use someone else's kids. You can use my kids.
I'm like, these are Adam's kids, everybody.
We'll do a
I'm here
photo shoot.
for engagement.
Um, all right. So just one last question before we start to wrap up here. I'm kind of
Sure.
curious about the curation piece because a lot of the questions that I ask are for attorneys that maybe to understand how easy this is to produce the content, but or get the content out there, and then production we've already talked about. But you have your curation service too. So how does that work? And if I'm an attorney and I have some blogs that a marketing person has written, what does that process look like?
Yeah. So that turns our service into a little more of like an agency style kind of setup. You'll have a one on one meeting with a content curator, and they'll get to know things about like your brand tone, your brand voice, the message that you like to send consistently, where your content lives, like if you have a blog or if you have a podcast or both. And then depending on how much output you've signed up for, they will be in charge of going through that content and finding the best snippets. So, for instance, if it's a blog, we know that we usually pick about 100 words and those get turned into text motion videos that are about 90 seconds with like video and audio and all the fun stuff behind it. So they're really tasked with combing through your old content, finding really great nuggets. They'll create the really savvy headlines for you, and they'll submit it to the content hackers is what we call them on your behalf, and basically like they're a member of your team. So it really eliminates that painstaking process of being like, oh God, I don't want to listen to myself on my podcast for 84 episodes that I already recorded. I get sick of hearing the sound of my own voice. So it's like, I know nobody else wants to do that either or tasks anybody with that. So that's really what we kind of take off the plate. And the cool thing is every single content curator is they're content writers and they are also digital marketer certified in like tons of different things when it comes to copywriting and content. So they know what to look for. They know how to write savvy headlines. They know your audience. They can adapt to that. And it just kind of it really streamlines the process.
That's awesome. So if you have a bunch of blog content and you don't want to do a lot of work and you want to get yourself out there, I Repurpose House to curate the content and then create the assets. Do they post it as well? Do you
We
guys
do.
post?
We can go as far as posting it and writing all your social media copy and your hashtag research and all that fun stuff. Yeah.
Love it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, Shana, thanks so much for joining us today. What's the best way for people to find out more about you and Repurpose House?
Just repurposehouse.com is kind of the mecca. It has access to courses where you can learn to do this stuff yourself. We've got an awesome blog that's always like giving you new cool stuff and info on all the platforms. And then that's where you can learn more about the service.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks, Adam.